The scent of barbecued ribs, fresh-cut grass, and Aunt Martha's peach cobbler filled the air as I parked at the edge of my grandmother's sprawling backyard. Folding tables were lined with homemade dishes, bright streamers fluttered in the breeze, and the unmistakable buzz of family chatter surrounded the space. Everyone looked cheerful, radiant, almost too perfect, just as it always was at a Whitmore family reunion. I sat in my car a moment longer than I should have, gripping the steering wheel and breathing deeply. Come on, Emily, just a few hours. Smile, nod, deflect the questions. You've done it before. I stepped out, adjusted the soft linen skirt I'd worn for comfort, not style, and walked up the stone path toward the crowd. Emily! Someone called. It was Aunt Lorraine, making a beeline toward me with her high-pitched laugh and the same gold chain she'd worn since the 90s. She hugged me and leaned back to get a good look. Still doing that little, what is it, online artwork thing? I smiled. Graphic design. I run a studio now. Oh, well, maybe someday you'll find a real job, she giggled, patting my arm. Real job. That phrase hung in the air like a bad smell. I kept walking, my shoes crunching the gravel path as I headed toward the tent in the center of the yard, the hub of attention where my father stood, already holding court. In one hand, he had a microphone. In the other, a solo cup filled with what I assumed was sweet tea, though it could have just as easily been whiskey. And of course, Jason just landed a senior engineering role at Lockheed. The boy's brilliant, runs in the blood, he announced, the crowd erupting in polite applause. I stood toward the back, close enough to hear, far enough to disappear. Now Jenna, my sweet Jenna, law school, third year, top of her class. Can you believe it? I told her since she was a little girl, she was destined for greatness. More claps. Cheers. My cousin Jenna gave a humble wave. And Brandon? Oh, he's got his own business now. Tech startup. He's meeting with investors next week. My father's voice beamed with pride. His chest puffed with every sentence, as if their achievements were direct reflections of him. I waited. Part of me wondered if this year would be different. And Emily, he started, pausing for just a beat too long. A few heads turned in my direction. I raised my chin. Dad chuckled. The kind of chuckle people use when they don't know what else to say. Well, she's still figuring things out, I suppose. You know Emily, the creative one. He waved it off like I was some quirky hobbyist instead of a woman who ran a design studio, who paid her own rent, bought her own car, and managed 5 clients that month alone. A soft murmur of awkward laughter followed, the kind where no one really knows if it's okay to laugh or not. I felt every eye on me for that single, unbearable moment. Not with admiration or pride, but with pity. Heat rushed to my cheeks. I swallowed the lump in my throat, forced a small smile, and slowly placed my cup down on the table beside me. Without a word, I turned and walked away. I passed the kids jumping in the inflatable bounce house, the couples sipping sangria under umbrellas, the aunts gossiping near the dessert table. No one stopped me, no one asked. Because this was normal. Emily being quiet, being sensitive, being the odd one. But what they didn't know was that this time, I wasn't walking away to be polite. I was walking away because I was done. My sandals crunched against the familiar gravel as I left the party behind me. Laughter still rang in the air, distant but sharp, like wind chimes in a storm. My pace quickened. I wasn't trying to cause a scene. I just needed space. I needed somewhere I could breathe. Past the swing set and the vegetable garden, behind the tool shed and old chicken coop, the trees thickened. I found the footpath I'd taken so many times as a girl, when I needed to hide, when Mom was still alive, when Dad's expectations loomed like storm clouds I couldn't outpace. The woods wrapped around me like a familiar blanket, a contrast to the suffocating judgment of that backyard. I followed the winding trail until I reached the clearing, a quiet meadow dappled with golden sunlight and wildflowers. The air smelled of earth and pine needles, and for the first time all day, I exhaled. There, nestled between 2 large oaks, was the old tree stump. my sanctuary. I sat down, brushing off pine needles and dirt, and let my mind drift. As a child, this was my escape. I'd bring sketchbooks here, balanced on my knees while I drew the birds, the trees, the way the wind danced in the grass. Back then, Mom would pack me a lunch and let me stay for hours. She'd say things like, "Creativity is a kind of magic, Em. Some people won't get it, but that doesn't make it less real." She always believed in my art, even when my drawings were messy, even when I colored outside the lines, especially then. But after she passed away, everything changed. Dad became harder, sharper, more results-oriented. "Your mother babied you," he'd say when I cried. "You've got to toughen up." Toughen up. I'd spent years trying. I pulled out my phone. Notifications buzzed. Emails, client updates, texts. I had 5 contracts pending approval. One from a tech firm in Boston that wanted me to redesign their app interface. Another from a publishing house that loved my book cover illustrations. I wasn't figuring things out. I'd figured it out years ago. I had a solid portfolio, a growing list of clients, and most importantly, freedom. I chose who I worked with. I made my own hours. I paid my bills on time. But none of that mattered to people like my father. To him, real success wore a suit, had an office, and came with health insurance and a 401k. My life didn't fit into his version of what an adult should look like. So instead of asking about it, he dismissed it entirely. My jaw clenched as I thought of the way he smiled when talking about Jason's promotion, or Jenna's law school scholarship, or Brandon's investor meetings. Each one got a glowing paragraph. And I got a footnote. I opened my notes app and started typing. They called me a failure at the family reunion today. Not in so many words, but it was clear. My father listed everyone else's achievements like a roll call of pride. When it came to me, he laughed and said I was still figuring things out. Here's what he doesn't know. I paused, stared out at the sun-bleached meadow, and kept going. I built my own business from scratch. I worked nights and weekends and holidays to grow it. I taught myself how to code, how to design, how to brand. I helped nonprofits raise money through campaigns I created. I've worked with authors, tech companies, musicians, and educators. I've cried over failed pitches and danced over surprise client testimonials. But to my family, I'm still just the creative one. The one who hasn't figured it out. I kept typing, faster now. I walked out today, not because I couldn't handle a joke, but because I finally realized I didn't need to stay at a table where I was always going to be underestimated. It's okay to leave spaces that shrink you. It's okay to want more than polite tolerance. I'm done begging for validation in rooms that were never built for me. My thumb hovered over the screen. I wasn't sure if I was writing a diary entry, a letter, or maybe something else. Maybe I'd post it. Maybe someone else out there needed to hear it. A gust of wind rustled the leaves above me. I closed my eyes and let the sun warm my face. I wasn't a failure. I wasn't a joke. I was just someone who no longer needed permission to exist. I didn't go home right away. Instead, I sat in the clearing for nearly an hour, letting the breeze cool my skin and the soft sounds of birds and rustling branches mend something deep inside. It was quiet here, but it wasn't empty. Out in the backyard, surrounded by voices, I had felt more invisible than I ever did alone in the woods. Eventually, I rose, brushed off my skirt, and made my way back to my car. I didn't walk through the reunion. I took the long way around, past the gravel driveway, and down the side of the house, avoiding all the forced smiles and sympathetic stares. I could already imagine the whispers. "She's always been sensitive. You know how Emily is. Maybe she just couldn't handle hearing the truth." But what truth? That I wasn't good enough unless my success could be measured by a company name on a LinkedIn profile? That because my work was digital and freelance, it didn't count? I drove back to my apartment in the city with the windows down and the music off. I wanted silence, the kind that lets you hear your own heartbeat. My phone buzzed twice on the drive. Once from my cousin Jenna, once from an unknown number I suspected was Aunt Lorraine. I didn't answer either. When I got home, I dropped my bag on the entryway table and sat cross-legged on the couch. The sunlight from my large studio windows spilled across the wooden floors. My laptop rested on the coffee table, my sketchpad still open beside it. This space, this life, it wasn't fancy, but it was mine. I picked up the sketchpad and stared at the unfinished drawing on the page. A girl sitting on a tree stump, surrounded by wildflowers. It was from memory, the very clearing I had just been in. I added a few more strokes, darkened the shadows around the trees, and suddenly my vision became clearer. This wasn't just for me anymore. I stood up, walked to my desk, and flipped open my laptop. I logged into my design website, scrolled past my client galleries, and opened the blog section I had been too afraid to launch for over a year. I'd always hesitated, worried that my writing was too emotional, too raw, too personal. But today, that was the point. I pasted the note I'd typed in the meadow, added a few more paragraphs about my work, my journey, and what it meant to define success on your own terms. I titled it, The Girl at the Edge of the Table, Why I Walked Out. Before I could second-guess myself, I hit publish. The next morning, I awoke to the sound of my phone buzzing, 5 missed calls, 2 voicemails, over a dozen messages. My heart jumped. Had I made a mistake? I opened my Instagram and blinked in disbelief. Hundreds of new notifications, comments from strangers, DMs from women saying, I felt this, and thank you for saying what I never could. Some were small business owners, some were artists, some were daughters like me. Tired of being compared, dismissed, or overlooked. The blog post had been shared more than I imagined possible. A design page reposted it. Then, a feminist career account. By 10 a.m., the post had gone viral within niche creative circles. And then, a text from my father. Dad, we need to talk. Call me when you're ready. I stared at the screen, 5 simple words. My thumb hovered over the reply button, but I didn't type anything yet. What could he possibly want to say? That I embarrassed the family? That I twisted his words? That I overreacted? Or, and the thought hit me like a quiet thunderclap, maybe he'd read the post too. I paced my living room, biting my thumbnail, heart pounding. Then my phone rang again. Jason. I let it go to voicemail, then played it back on speaker. Hey, Em, I just wanted to say I read your post. I didn't really. I never thought about how Dad acts toward you. I guess I just figured that was your dynamic. But after reading that, I don't know. I feel like I missed something. I'm sorry, call me? I sat down. That was unexpected. Jason, of all people, had never been cruel, just complicit. The golden child. The mirror that Dad looked into with pride. But now, even Jason saw it. The tears came quietly. Not the broken kind, not grief. This was something else. Something like validation. Not from Dad, but from myself. From the world I'd reached beyond that backyard. From the women, and even men, who saw my worth not as a footnote, but a story worth telling. I wasn't the girl who sat quietly anymore. I was the one who stood, walked out, and found her voice. I finally called him. After pacing my apartment, stress-eating half a bag of trail mix, and dramatically monologuing to my houseplant, Ferdinand, yes, I name my plants, because someone around here has to listen without judgment, I hit call Dad. The phone rang 3 times before his deep, gravelly voice answered. Emily, simple, Curtin. No, hey sweetie. No, how are you doing? Just my name. Like I'd been summoned to the principal's office for the crime of embarrassing the family honor. Which, frankly, was hilarious considering the same family included Uncle Ray, who once tried to fry bacon on a George Foreman grill outside in the rain. Hi, Dad, I replied, keeping my voice calm, cool, and 1 latte away from legally chill. There was a long silence. For a second, I thought the call had dropped. I read what you wrote. Ah, there it was. No pleasantries, straight to the point. Classic Dad. Yeah, I said. I figured. Another beat of silence. Was he trying to calculate how mad he was allowed to be without pushing me to post a part two? It was raw, he said finally. A little dramatic. I held back a snort. Maybe, but true. You think I haven't supported you? I sat up straighter, fingers tightening on the phone. Dad, you stood in front of 30 relatives and called me a failure with a chuckle. You listed Jason's promotion, Jenna's scholarship, even Brandon's fantasy football win. But when you got to me, you waved your hand like I was some glitch in the system. He sighed heavily, the sound of a man trying to figure out how not to say the wrong thing, but still be a little wrong. I was joking. Dad, it wasn't funny. You know what's funny? I once did a logo for a bakery that turned out to be a front for an underground poker ring. That's funny. Me being invisible in front of my entire family? Not funny. He was quiet. Then, surprisingly, he chuckled. Okay, the poker ring is funny. I smiled in spite of myself. I just thought, he began again, I thought you were still figuring it out. I didn't realize how serious it was. The blog, the clients, that you were really making it. I blinked. That was probably the closest thing to an apology my father had ever given. It wasn't Shakespeare, but it also wasn't a total denial. You know, I said slowly, I pay my own rent, handle all my own taxes, run contracts, negotiate retainers. I basically do everything a CEO does, but in leggings. Leggings? Yes, Dad. Power pants for people who need flexibility and emotional support. He actually laughed. It was gruff, short, but real. Maybe I was wrong, he said finally. You've built something. I see that now. Thank you, I replied, a lump forming in my throat. But Emily? Uh-oh. I braced myself. You've got to admit, that thing about the tree stump was a little melodramatic. I laughed, this time loudly. Dad, I literally sat on a mossy stump and processed my generational trauma in nature, like I was starring in my own indie film. Let me have my moment. Fine, fine, he said, chuckling again. Just, maybe don't make your old man the villain in the sequel. No promises. Depends on how Thanksgiving goes. We hung up shortly after. The call was awkward and bumpy, but it felt like progress. Not a full healing, maybe, but a band-aid on a wound that had been open far too long. Later that week, I sat in my favorite cafe, laptop open, sketchpad beside me, sipping a chai latte with extra cinnamon, because some of us fight our battles with spice and froth. My post had passed 100,000 views. I'd gained 3 new clients from people who'd found me through the blog. One even wanted to license my illustration of the tree stump for a mental health awareness campaign. Not bad for a failure. Jason texted me again. Mom would be proud of you, you know. I stared at that for a long time. Then Jenna messaged, read your post. I always admired your bravery. Sorry I never said it before. And just like that, the shame I'd carried around like a weighted blanket started to unravel. It wasn't just about me. It was about every person in a family who had been underestimated, mischaracterized, or boxed into a role they never auditioned for. It was about people who got up from tables that didn't feed them and found better ones, sometimes with extra cinnamon. 3 weeks passed. 3 weeks since I walked out of the family reunion. 3 weeks since my post went viral. The internet lifted me up like I was Beyoncé with a Wi-Fi connection, and my dad made the world's most awkward attempt at a halfway apology. And in that time, business was booming. Emails were flooding in from women asking me to design logos, personal brands, even book covers. One client told me, I want your sass in my font, which might be the greatest compliment I've ever received. Even my apartment seemed brighter. I rearranged the living room, hung up more of my own art, and for once, I didn't feel like I was trying to prove anything to anyone. Until I got a text that read, Hey Em, Thanksgiving's coming up. You coming? Jason, followed by, P.S. Dad says he'll behave. No roastings allowed, unless it's the turkey. I stared at it. Thanksgiving. A reunion sequel. With pie. Did I really want to go back? Then came another message, this time from Aunt Lorraine, queen of ceramic figurines and passive-aggressive side comments. We're making extra room at the table for your creativity, sweetie. Bring your success with you. Which, I'm 99% sure was her way of saying, we read your blog and now we're scared of you. But hey, I'll take the respect, even if it's fear-based. The decision loomed over me like a dessert table you don't trust. Beautiful, but hiding potential disaster in the whipped cream. Finally, I messaged Jason back. Only if I get to sit next to Grandma. She's the only one who liked my childhood drawings of dogs that looked like potatoes. He replied instantly, Deal. But fair warning, she's been bragging about you nonstop since she figured out how to use Facebook. God help us all. Thanksgiving arrived with all the predictable chaos. The turkey was dry. Uncle Ray tried to deep fry a ham and almost set the garage on fire. My cousin Brandon brought a girl named Willow, who introduced herself by saying she was raw vegan and emotionally solar-powered. Still not sure what that means. And then, there was my dad. He looked the same, sweater vest, socks with sandals, and that perpetual look like he's just smelled something suspicious. But when I walked in, something shifted. He stood, he hugged me, and, hold on to your emotional support water bottles. He actually said, Glad you came. The table wasn't complete without you. I blinked, twice, then checked to see if someone had swapped him with a hologram. Thanks, Dad. I brought my sarcasm and boundary setting. Hope that's okay. He smirked. Sounds like you brought the essentials. At dinner, things were normalish. Nobody mentioned the blog directly, though I caught several people glancing my way like I might explode into feminist monologue at any moment. I just smiled and passed the potatoes. Then, mid-meal, my grandma stood up. She tapped her glass with her fork and declared she had something to say, which usually meant either a blessing or a scandal. I just want to say, she began, holding up her wine glass, that I'm proud of all my grandkids, but especially Emily. Oh no. Not again. My mashed potatoes froze on the fork halfway to my mouth. She's the only one who draws pictures, writes essays, and knows how to make a website. I don't know what a blog is, but people all over the world read it. That's talent. Half the table blinked. Dad's face flushed just enough to be interesting. Also, Grandma added with a wink, I read it. Twice. Thought it was a little salty. But then again, so is this stuffing, Lorraine. I almost choked on my water. Grandma for president. Aunt Lorraine muttered something about sage being subjective, and the table erupted into a mixture of laughs, awkward chuckles, and a toast from Jason. To Emily, for saying what needed to be said. I raised my glass, heart thudding. And for once, I didn't feel like the black sheep. I felt like the lead act. Sure, some still didn't get me. Sure, the validation took years and a viral post. And sure, someone, Brandon, tried to mansplain Bitcoin to me between courses. But this time, I smiled and asked if his coin had ever bought him dignity. Silence. Beautiful, gravy-drenched silence. And in that moment, surrounded by people who had finally started seeing me, not as the one who didn't measure up, but the one who measured differently, I realized something. I didn't walk out to burn bridges. I walked out so I could build new ones, with boundaries and glittery signage. It's funny how walking out of something can lead you straight back in, but this time, on your own terms. After Thanksgiving, I went back to my city life, back to designing bold, unapologetic branding for clients who wanted their stories to shine, and back to my blog, where honesty and humor had built a community of people who also felt like they'd spent years being the disappointment at someone's table. My inbox became a collection of confessions. Your story made me stand up to my mom. I left a toxic job after reading your post. I'm an accountant and haven't drawn in 10 years. I picked up a pencil today. I cried. A lot. Mostly happy tears. The kind that taste like healing and a little bit like cheesecake. One day, I got a handwritten letter from my dad. Yes, actual ink on paper, Dad. It read, Emily, I've spent my life valuing achievement in numbers, promotions, degrees, trophies. I didn't realize the strength it takes to build something from nothing. You've done that. And more importantly, you've made people feel something. That's not failure. That's legacy. Love a Dad. I kept that letter in a frame, right next to my Wi Fi password and my favorite drawing. A little girl, messy hair and crayons in her fist, grinning wide while a crowd of stick figures cheered. She looks a lot like me. This year, for the holidays, I hosted. Not just family. I invited my friends, my therapist, the barista, who never judges my 3 p.m. caffeine choices, even Willow, yes, the solar-powered vegan. Turns out she makes amazing mushroom gravy. And we sat around my table. There were mismatched chairs, a playlist that ranged from Aretha to Arctic Monkeys, and exactly one rule. You're not allowed to apologize for who you are, only for double dipping or saying moist unironically. We laughed until it hurt. Someone toasted to love, someone else toasted to art, and I, for the first time, toasted to myself. Not because I'd gone viral, not because I'd earned forgiveness, but because I had finally learned that validation tastes best when it's seasoned with truth and served at a table you set yourself. So here's to the ones who got up and walked out, not in anger, but in clarity. Here's to the ones who didn't wait to be invited to the table and built one instead. And here's to knowing. Sometimes, failure is just success in a plot twist. If this story resonates with you, hit the like button and leave your story in the comments section. And of course, subscribe to my channel for more real, raw, and ridiculous stories. Your support means everything to this channel, and don't forget to share with anyone who might be struggling to recognize their own value. Thank you for watching, and remember, knowing your worth isn't selfish, it's essential.